Hey y'all, Chill here, back from the exploding planet Krypton, here for a brand new video. And you know, the last two times I talked about comic book type things, were my Invincible video and my X-Men 97 video. And it's funny because I never actually talked about my favorite superhero, Superman. Superman is easily one of my favorite superheroes ever. He's up there with Batman, Nightwing, Spider-Man, and Wally West the Flash as some of my favorites of all time. I just love everything about him. I love his stories. You know what? I'll be back. Give me like 5 seconds. I love his stories. They are amazing, and that will come into play later. I know a lot of people have their favorite superheroes either from watching the movies, playing the games, or from their childhoods, but Superman being one of my favorites is kind of more of a recent development. It was during high school when I really got into reading superhero comics and reading comics in general, and there are a lot of Superman comics, and when I read them, and I read the good ones, they are just really, really good, and I truly fell in love with the character. That plus his depiction in shows like Young Justice or Smallville or the recent My Adventures of Superman just elevate his character even more for me. If you know me personally, you would know that there's two types of characters I really, really like. The first one are really rude and aggressive and prideful characters who can back up their pride. And the second are really happy, just joyful characters that do good things, like Superman. And the thing is, sometimes when I tell people this, I get scared that they're gonna think I'm basic for liking Superman. That liking Superman is like liking Taylor Swift or something. However, he is still somehow the most underrated superhero of all time. Isn't it crazy that a character as popular as Superman has the status where if you go up to a random person in the street and ask, "Hey buddy, do you like Superman?" They're probably gonna say, or they could even say no. Them saying yes is actually not that likely. And the sad thing is, I don't even have to question why Superman is so underrated, because there's one public perception of him that is just so mind-boggling. Some people think Superman is boring. I know that's crazy, right? Wait, you in the audience, do you also think Superman is boring? Oh my god. Well, I'm not gonna judge you and I'm not gonna blame you, because the truth is, a lot of people don't like Superman or think he's boring because they don't know a lot about him. And the mainstream has been doing a pretty lousy job of representing him through media. Only in the last few years, actually, trying to improve it with the previously mentioned My Adventures of Superman. And also the new James Gunn Superman movie that's gonna be coming out in 2025. And I'm personally super excited for this movie, but I know a lot of people still don't care about Superman. But before his movie comes out, I'm making it my mission to change your mind. Yes, viewer, your mind. And to explain to you why Superman isn't boring. Let's go. Before we talk about why Superman isn't boring, I think it's important to figure out who is Superman and where did he come from. The Superman was created in the 1930s by these two men, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Joe Mama. Yeah! This was created during the rise of comic strips when those became really popular. Syndicated ones, whether it was the masked hero like Zorro or other comic characters I can't think of right now. And they had several failed attempts at creating this Superman character, whether it was being a mad scientist, whether it was being a supervillain, whether it was being an adventurer, or many other things. Hell, they even tried to change creative teams, which with two people is f***ed up, and go to different publishers. But they finally settled on making the Superman an alien from the planet Krypton, giving him powers such as super strength and bulletproof skin, and the ability to leap a building. You heard that right. Superman did not start with the crazy amount of abilities he has now. It just started with this simple concept. And because of the success of the Superman, Action Comics went from an anthology series into just being Superman stories. And Superman went from, being just a character to being a popular character to being the stereotypical superhero. And again, this is during a time when superheroes as we know it didn't really exist. Superman was the first one who exists as we think of them. costumed crusaders in the modern day. Like, yeah, they had space adventuring heroes and mass vigilantes before, but none of them are really considered superheroes. And in the creation of Superman, I actually think it's super important to point out this, that Jerry and Joe were both the children of Jewish immigrants, both their parents coming from the, at the time, Russian Empire. And it was the 1930s. We know what was happening during the 1930s. And Superman being a character from another world coming to America and being the hero that he is, it's pretty important that, you know, Superman is an immigrant because bro was created by the children of immigrants. And the fact that that was important from the finalization of Superman's creation into the very first Action Comics is super telling into how important this character is, not just as a power fantasy, but as a message about humanity. And I have a message for humanity, one that is so deathly important that you must listen right now. The truth is, everyone, you should click that like button. Gotcha. No, but seriously, it really helps me and it helps the videos and it lets me know that you guys want more comic book based content. I mean, you guys love that X-Men video, but clicking that like button lets me know that you guys want more content just like this and, you know, enjoyed me talking about it. This is a bit more loose and I love comics, I love Superman. So let's try to get this video to 30 likes, okay? Okay. Remember, support the content and support the creator. Anyway, back to the video. And in terms of who Superman is within the fiction, I mean, we all know he's from the planet Krypton. He was blowing up and he got sent to Earth and he got found by Pa and Ma Kent in Kansas. And then he grew up in Smallville and then he went to Metropolis and he's Superman. He's double identity. He's Clark Kent and he's Superman. Oh, how do people not realize Clark Kent is Superman? This is f***ing why. God damn it, pisses me off. Why does no one pay attention to the fact that he's acting? He is acting. He's not just acting the same way both ways, you idiots. And honestly, David Cornsweet, is that his name? His Superman is the biggest difference between a Clark Kent and a Superman I've seen in a while, and I like it a lot. I think he's gonna do good. And Superman throughout the years obviously grew and evolved as he got new powers, as he got new origin points, as he got friends, as he got pink kryptonite, which turns him gay. And Superman has generally remained the same, and I think that's super important because there are comic book characters who have changed and evolved to looking into something completely different than who they were when, you know, their very first issue came out. And Superman, while having some differences, is still pretty similar. And it's interesting to think because at the time, superheroes weren't really a thing. And yes, while Jerry and Joe wanted to make comic books, they wanted to make them for a reason. They didn't know that superheroes would make a lot of money, so they made this character to, you know, be this strong guy who helps people and who's, you know, a nice guy. Especially during the 1930s. Yeah, that's super important. But as time evolved, so did the public's perception of Superman. And now we are in the year of our Lord, 2024. And the public perception of Superman is very interesting. First, Superman is too strong. This is just kind of silly to me. Like, okay, yes, that's correct. Superman is very, very strong. He has a lot of powers. Hell, in the Silver Age, his powers were ridiculous. And even now in the contemporary day, he has a lot of insane powers. Some writers give him brand new powers. Some writers like Grant Morrison make him sing to save the day. And I think it's fine. I think a lot of people interpret powers and magic and superpowers all in the exact same way, that they should all be used for, you know, the purpose of creating engaging and dramatic combat. I mean, which can work. I mean, suddenly if Spider-Man could regenerate limbs, that would be really weird and would be very bad for his fights. It would bring away the tension from some of his fights because Spider-Man does have that dramatic fight, you know, dynamic. But I think a lot of people don't realize that the reason why Superman has so many powers is that he's supposed to be this big, strong guy. People are like, oh, it doesn't make dramatic fights. Superman's fights aren't usually dramatic. Like, Superman isn't in every single like story arc fighting against someone and he's like, oh my god, this is so difficult, and then as the audience we're like, just use your powers. That's not what's going on. The writers are fully aware that Superman is super powerful and they use that to their advantage. And when Superman does have dramatic fights, it's against people that are at his level, like Darkseid, like Apocalypse, and like Doomsday. Why the fuck do those two sound so... Really? Apocalypse and Doomsday? I hate comic books. They suck. I hate comics. But I understand the criticism. If you're reading comic books and you usually read comics of characters of lower levels of strength or even street levels of strength, when you see someone who's so overpowered, you're gonna be like, well, how is anything gonna feel dramatic when this guy can do everything? I'm just letting you know, that's not what Superman stories are about. And if you're reading Superman stories to get dramatic fights, stop reading, because you're not gonna get them. The whole point of Superman is that he is this grand figure, is that he is super strong. Like, that is the premise. That's not a side effect of bad writing, that is the premise. And therefore you get to see him live his life. And the interesting thing is what comes out of that. So when people say Superman is too strong, to me, that just sounds like you guys haven't consumed a lot of Superman stories, which is fine, because Superman stories are kind of not super easy to find. At least not as easy as I wish they were. There should be way more Superman cartoons. Why are there only like 2 or like 3? Are there even 3? There aren't as many cartoons about Superman as I wish there were, but goddammit, there are a lot of movies. And some of them are made by everyone's favorite director, Zack Snyder. Snyder fans, just wait, stay there. I don't hate Zack Snyder. I actually thought Man of Steel was entertaining. Okay, I'm not one of those Zack Snyder absolute haters and detesters. I think he is a good director, and I think he makes fun movies. I just think he mishandled Superman a lot. And this all comes down to how Zack Snyder interprets the character Superman. Now, I'm not someone who's completely against Zack Snyder's Christification of Superman. I mean, one of my favorite authors, Grant Morrison, does a lot of Christ metaphors in their own stories for Superman occasionally. But I think Zack Snyder did not put an emphasis on the hope of Superman, on the joy of Superman. And I know that was the point of the first Man of Steel movie. It was supposed to be, watching him become Superman. But I just wish there was a bit more happiness and a bit more joy. Like, Zack Snyder's attempt to deconstruct Superman is cute and is fun and would make a interesting comic. I think as the major Superman movie for like a decade, I didn't like that. But I'm also a big believer that with comic book characters, there is a version of them that we are giving to mainstream audiences by putting them in movies. And it is kind of our responsibility as artists and storytellers, I say our, even though I don't do shit, to put out the versions of these characters that we want the mainstream audience to think of when they hear the name. Like, yeah, I'm totally cool with a Spider-Man Noir series. If it was the only fucking Spider-Man thing out, I would be pissed off. And yeah, that's an alternate universe. That's very different. But in my opinion, Zack Snyder's way of storytelling is basically an alternate universe. And also how Zack Snyder treated Superman in the Justice League movies, killing him off and then bringing him back with that black suit that I really don't like. It's just, I don't like it. I'm not gonna claim it's disrespectful to the character of Superman. I believe Zack Snyder probably likes Superman, but it's just, the public now thinks this is Superman. However, Zack Snyder fans, I want to say that he is not my #1 enemy when it comes to how the mainstream media perceives Superman. That's going to be the evil Superman trope. If you're one of my friends and you've mentioned this to me, you have heard me rant about it time and time again, but I really dislike the evil Superman trope. And not for the reasons you may think. I'm not one of those people who's like, Superman should never be bad ever. He's a symbol and therefore should remain in one interpretation. That's not what I mean. You can have as many AUs, as many alternate universes, write them how you want, right? But it's the fact that the evil Superman trope is not good writing. It's that most of the time, writers don't do a good job with it. I'm going to make it clear which evil Superman I like. Omni-Man. I like him. He's good. I love Invincible. Homelander. I have not caught up with the boys, but from what I know, I like him. And when I rewatch it, I bet he's going to be one of my favorite villains. Oh, Sentry, I guess. I kind of liked Brightburn. It was a bit boring, but I was entertained. And you're correct. I don't like evil Superman from Injustice. I actually really don't like Injustice as a story. I have a lot of issues with it. I would want to make a separate video on it. But let me just say, Clark Kent would not go evil just because of what happened in Injustice. That makes no sense, okay? For that to make sense, there has to be a lot of differences with who Clark Kent is at that time. And the idea of like, oh, the timeline split there doesn't make sense to me, because I could imagine that happening to Clark. He wouldn't become evil, man. super evil duper evil, man. The evil Superman trope, as it's being written now, is a bit boring. However, it can be really good. I'm gonna be pretty self-indulgent and say that in my own writing, I have a character that could be considered an evil Superman trope. However, it's not Superman, but they're an asshole. It's Superman, but what if the symbol of hope fell into despair? It's what if Superman couldn't save everybody, and that took a toll on him, that made him depressed, and that turned him to a much, much darker path where he sought out an ultimatum, and this ultimatum puts him in the opposition of the protagonist. And even to do that, it still isn't Clark Kent. Like, that still wouldn't make sense if it was Superman. Not to rant about evil Superman forever, but I do believe that the creation of evil Superman has changed how people view Superman. Now people think that this dude can just be evil at the drop of a hat. Not true. It's not even true. And the fact people think that, it means that people are imagining a much different version of Clark Kent than who actually exists in the comics. Someone who is endlessly good, that despite all the strength, will always do the good thing. Because when you can think he can just do the bad thing if something bad happens to him, like, it's a pretty bad thing, but like, if that happens, he'll go bad, that immediately changes how you think of him. And finally, too basic. I just fundamentally disagree with this. And not in the way that I'm saying Superman is completely unique or that Superman is like no other. Superman is basic. Superman is the archetypical superhero. I mean, superhero and Superman are almost synonyms at this point. But in my opinion, he's not too basic. He is just the baseline. He is the original superhero. Like, that's not too basic. He's just the first one, and every superhero is built off of that. And in my opinion, if you're a fan of superheroes, by default, you're at least a little bit of a fan of Superman. You don't have to love him. I'm not gonna say you're wrong or stupid for not liking Superman, but I'm just saying, something you like about your favorite comic book character comes from Superman. Chill, you're one to talk. I mean, you're saying Superman is all of these things, but based on everything I've watched, I think Superman is still super basic and overpowered and boring. Like, he doesn't fight? So what are his stories about? Well, viewer, thank you for telling me that. And I want to say that if you've been paying attention to the visuals and not just watching this video while you draw, you've noticed that I've pulled out this comic several times. All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. I'll do something that big studios don't want to do, and I'll credit the original source material. All-Star Superman is a 12-issue miniseries, and it was written by Grant Morrison, penciled by Frank Quitely, and colored by Jamie Grant. And this is easily my favorite Superman story. Like, to risk throwing this whole video off a loop and no longer doing like quick cuts, like, I don't script my stuff, I just talk. This is my favorite Superman comic. This is one of my favorite comics of all time. It is amazing. Grant Morrison, pronouns they, them, are one of my favorite comic book authors ever. They make some of the craziest, weirdest, but most heartfelt and emotionally gripping stories that comic books have ever seen. Like, they're amazing. They did New X-Men. They did Doom Patrol, We 3, Marvel Boy, Superman the Authority, I think they did. Oh, and JLA, Final Crisis. And this is honestly their magnum opus. The story of All-Star is Superman on a mission absorbed way too much solar radiation, like an insane amount. And now, Superman, the mythic greatest hero of all time with all these crazy powers, is dying. So you follow his last days alive. And if that sounds good to you, if that sounds interesting to you, please read this story. It is genuinely, it's so good. I love this book so much. It's so good. The solar radiation made him stronger. It tripled his strength and it made him immune to kryptonite radiation. And the crazy thing is that for people who are like, oh, Superman is so OP, he's stronger in this book, and this is still his best story, in my opinion, easily. I really like Superman for all seasons as well, but All-Star is my favorite. Superman does insane things in this book. If you haven't read it and you don't want to know anything about it, pause this video and go read it, but I'm about to spoil it. Well, I'm about to just say what he does. He tells Lois Lane that he's Superman, which nowadays isn't that crazy because they're married and she knows, and that's sort of become like a mainstream part of their relationship, at least in the comics. The new movie's probably not going to do that, but Superman tells Lois Lane he's Superman, and then lets her have Superman powers for 24 hours. Like, he does crazy things. One of the greatest panels in comics One of the best pages of all time is when Superman stops a young teenage gay person from committing suicide, and it's really heartwarming. Like, he just talks to her, and that's the thing. Like, Superman does these crazy things in this story, fights people, has crazy fights, goes into the sun, does insane stuff. But what's really important, what's really key in All-Star Superman are the relationships, are the people he talks to. He goes to a children's hospital to say hi, and it makes them happy, and that's one of the best moments in the book. Every single mini arc within All-Star Superman is about his relationship to someone else and how his humanity and their connection saves the day. Like, yes, Superman can lift a giant building, he can blow ice onto the sun to save some people, he can fight insane monsters that explode universes. But the most important thing is his humanity. The most important thing is he is helping people, not just physically, but he's helping people to make them feel better. He was raised right. He was raised to be a good person, and he is a good person. He's using those gifts to help humanity. And in his last days on Earth, he's like, I won't be here anymore. I can't save anyone when I'm dead. So I'm gonna do as much as I can right now to help people, as much as I can. And he goes about it like it's not even Superman is like having like, oh, the first ever animated panic attack in film. Like, it's Superman is just doing what he's got to do. He's just got to run with it. Like, he's not jolly, like ecstatic about it, but he's doing what he's got to do. He's Superman. That's a role model. That is the thing. Superman is a role model and an example, not just in our real world, but also within the story, and they blend into each other. Both Lois Lane and Lex Luthor gain Superman-like abilities in All-Star Superman, and both of them have realizations that he is just on a different level. Like, his powers just make him different. His powers put him essentially on a different plane of existence and a different plane of power, yet he's still managing to be human, to be optimistic, to connect to people, to help people, to be nice to his fellow man. He's still managing to do that. And not only is he doing that, but he's the best of us, you know? Despite his superness, which is more of a hindrance if anything, he is still the best of us. And to end off me talking about All-Star Superman, there's a quote from the author Grant Morrison that I actually really want to read. American writers often say they find it difficult to write Superman. They say he's too powerful. You can't give him problems. But Superman is a metaphor. For me, Superman has the same problems we do, but on a Paul Bunyan scale. If Superman walks the dog, he walks it around the asteroid belt because it can fly in space. When Superman's relatives visit, they come from the 31st century and bring some hellish monster conqueror from the future. But it's still a story about your relatives visiting. Paul Bunyan, if you don't know, being an American folk hero who did superhuman things. I do want to make a video about Grant Morrison at some point. They are insane and I love them. But Grant Morrison is always, in all of their stories, trying to communicate that superheroes are the new myths. They're the new legends. And the fact that this story is literally about the final days of Superman and how, because of this, he becomes a legend and icon in myth, like Hercules, but for the contemporary day. Is that not just telling us how we should view Superman? That we should view Superman as this great mythological figure, as this thing to aspire to, not just to be super strong and, you know, super powerful, but to be super kind, to be super human, to connect with people. That's why I think he's important, because of what he does to people, because of how he is as an icon, as a role model. It's an important superhero, one who is kind, one who does not always resort to the most insane forms of violence. In the hands of an excellent writer, Superman can be in some of the greatest stories ever told. I would consider All-Star Superman not just one of the best comics, not just one of the best Superman stories, pieces of media, but one of the best stories ever told. But in the hands of a writer, unaware of the impact that he has, Superman will easily just become another boring archetype that is in stories that are or mediocre, or just okay, or aren't really using the character to his fullest potential. Superman isn't about his powers, you know, his strength. It's not about power scaling. It's barely about his godlike nature. It's about the contrast of that. It's about his humanity. It's honestly about how kind Superman is to others. It's about how Superman is, how Clark Kent is, as a person. Superman isn't boring. To me, Superman is about hope. And hope is something we need always. And in that way, and Superman will be a character that we always need. Well, that was my video on Superman and if Superman was boring. I had a lot of fun recording. I know it's sort of breaking immersion to be like, oh, I'm having fun making this video that you're watching right now. Ooh, freaky video. But I really like Superman. He's a character I really love, and he was really easy to talk about. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video, seriously. If you liked the video, like I said, click that like button. 30 likes is our goal. While you're down there, comment your thoughts on Superman. Do you like Superman? Did you think he was boring before this video? Do you still think he's boring? That's okay. Have a discussion. Let's talk about Superman. Let's talk about what we think about it. And while you're down there, if you're not already, why don't you mind clicking that subscribe button? You know, boosting those numbers, road to 10K. That's the goal that I'm setting for myself mentally. That would be nice. Click that bell notification so you know exactly when I make a new video. I can say with some pretty good confidence that I've been uploading consistently. This is my 4th video in a row. Applause, applause, applause. If you enjoyed last week's video, which was a End of Evangelion parody, thank you. That video was super weird and not like my usual videos. I might make more like that if you guys really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's very, very funny. If that video gets enough views, maybe one day I'll actually talk about End of Evangelion. But anyway, y'all, thank you for watching. I hope you had an amazing time. I hope maybe I've changed your mind on Superman or reassured you why you love the character in the first place. Well, anyway, I'm gonna go reread All-Star Superman, actually. I think I missed you. Well, anyway, I hope all of you have a damn good one. Peace.